Welcome back to Recruiting Blitz. My name's Tim Verghese. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel before we get started. Be sure to check out our work over at InsideNebraska.com with fall camp starting up. We're ramping things back up again in terms of making sure you have as much coverage as possible from fall camp. Recruiting's ramping up again heading into the season, and we've got updates on visits. We posted a pretty sizable update last week on some top 27 targets expected in town in the season. So we're going to have coverage on that, coverage on fall camp, and expectations, and just a lot of preview content for some of y'all that have been maybe checked out of roster acquisition and where this roster kind of stands heading into the season. Kind of a refresher on some key positions to know, some key players to know ahead of the 2025 football season. And so in this episode, with not a whole lot happening on the recruiting side of things at this point, I did want to kind of circle back, want to wind the clock and touch on this 2025 class, and specifically which members of the 25 class I expect to contribute this fall. Nebraska put together a pretty impressive class in 25, if you recall, specifically at a few positions. I think they did a really good job at wide receiver, linebacker, defensive line, and offensive line. I want to touch on specifically five freshmen I think are going to contribute this fall. Maybe some honorable mentions, a couple other names in there as well, but mainly just wanted to focus on five that I think are going to contribute. And before we dive too much deeper into it, over the weekend I put up a piece over at Inside Nebraska on my expectations for all 35 newcomers, whether they're high school additions, whether they're transfer portal additions, just expectations for each and every one of them heading into the fall. So we're going to get right into it, just touching on, we'll start with the offensive side of the ball. The big news of the last few weeks and kind of the murmurs since kind of spring ended out of kind of what Isaiah Mosley's role is going to be. We now have confirmation he's in the running back room. He switched his number from 84 to 24, and he's now viewed as a running back in Nebraska's offense. I think formally that's what he is. That's his position title. I do think his role is going to be a bit of a hybrid type offensive weapon role, I think is the best way to put it. I wonder as fall camp progresses if we find out a specific name for that role. But I think it's gonna resemble something like what Dana Holgorsen did with Tavon Austin, and if that's kind of too far out for some of you, a more recent example or something you can kind of compare this to is what Scott Frost had Wandale Robinson do with the Duck R position, kind of a dynamic wide receiver that can take some carries out of the backfield, but also line up in the slot, line up out wide, can manufacture some touches for him, kind of be a featured piece within the offense and a bit of a chess piece that defenses have to account for every time he's on the field. As with that move, and as I kind of started to think about it, I do think Mosey's going to be the freshman we see the most on offense. I think there's a reason he's moved. I think um, Dana Holgorsen, his father, Jamar Mosey, running backs coach EJ Bartell, and the offensive staff have this vision for what his role is going to be. And that's so much different than every other freshman on the offense. I think Mosey's a guy that you're going to see from game one in some type of role, some type of capacity. Could start in a kind of handful of snaps as a kind of manufactured touches for, whether it's a screen, whether it's a handoff out of the backfield in a creative way. Perhaps Nebraska lines up two running backs in the backfield. One's Emmett Johnson, the other one's Isaiah Mosley. The motion one out, one takes a screen, the other one fakes the handoff. There's just a lot of options Nebraska now has with the versatility of Mosley. So I expect to see a lot of Mosley this fall, and I'd honestly expect his role to grow as the season progresses if he stays healthy. He's now up to on the north side of 200 pounds. I think he's built more like a running back now. And honestly, if you go back and listen to what we said and wrote about Mosey when he committed to Nebraska and what to expect out of him, his best traits in high school were what he does after the catch. Even his junior and senior season, Lisa North actually had him line up in the backfield as a running back. He's totaled, I think, close to 1,000 yards rushing over the last two seasons of his high school career. And you watch even just his receiver tape. His best stuff is what he does after the catch. Lee Summit North, the staff over there, manufactured touches for him, whether it was jet sweeps, whether it was screens, whether it was handoffs out of the backfield. They just wanted to get the ball in his hands and let him do what he does best. He's got really good field vision. Does a really good job of finding the open seams and green grass. Does a good job of maintaining upfield momentum while also kind of shifting through traffic and weaving his way through. Really thick lower body that when we went out to see him in the fall, kind of noticed that he's got a thicker lower body than you would expect, and it makes it hard for defenders to wrap up and bring him down. He's got good contact balance, really good ankle flexibility, hip flexibility, stuff you like. Honestly, you overall you look at his combination of traits, and it does kind of point to more of a running back than a receiver. But on top of all of that, he's a very good pass catcher. He's a very reliable pass catcher, very strong, very strong hands. Is a pretty savvy route runner, does a good job, and it is pretty technical as a route runner. And so that's why I think his role is going to be something between a receiver and a running back. But he's just another versatile option Dana Holgerson has to kind of attack defenses with. You have a couple of those body types now. You have him, you have a Jalen Bonner. You can even factor Emmett Johnson into it because of his effectiveness as a pass catcher. In the tight end room, you have a Carter Nelson who could be kind of a jumbo type receiver, slash tight end. You have Heinrich Haarberg, who's a bit of everything, can also, hypothetically, throw the ball if he needed to with his quarterback background. So you have like Dana Holgorsen has a bunch of options now and a lot of different versatile options. To attack defenses with. Another receiver I do expect to see a good bit of this fall is Cortez Mills, the freshman out of Homestead, Florida. Nebraska, it was a big recruiting win for them, flipping him away from Oklahoma in the fall. And he's a guy that, in my opinion, I think is going to see a good amount of snaps this fall. I think the receiver room, I mean, I don't think, I mean, this is pretty much fact. The receiver room is a lot deeper than it was last year. There's an idea that Mills could play a Ja'Cory Barney type role as a freshman, but I don't think there's that many snaps available. Nebraska has Dane Key added to the room, expected to be wide receiver one. Isaiah Hunter is going to play a pretty big role in the receiver room as well. Ja'Cory Barney returns, Jaren Bonner returns. You've got, lower in the like Quinn Clark and a few others in the room that, I do expect to contribute a good bit for Nebraska this fall. Demetrius Bell's a kind of a name that we can't really forget about as we talk about receivers. So where does Cortez Mills fit into that? I'm excited to see exactly where, and I'm excited to see how much Nebraska uses him, kind of what the expectations are for him as fall camp progresses. He's a guy that, unlike Barney is more of a slot type receiver. Who can play bigger than his frame, but the things that Mills does best are his route running ability and his contested catch ability. He's a guy that you can throw it up to, and more times than not, he's coming down with it. He prided himself on that in high school. He considers himself the best contested catch receiver in the country, and he's extremely confident, just like Ja'Cory Barney was and is. Coming out of South Florida. So I do expect to see a good amount of Cortez Mills this fall, just as a result of that. I think you're going to see him line up maybe in the slot, but outside as well, even at 6'1". He's a guy that can line up outside. Um, can stretch defenses. He's not a burner, but he's a really savvy route runner and does a good job of creating separation in and out of breaks. He's a very technical route runner who uses the kind of little nuances in his body movement to create separation. And he's a guy that I think the staff's going to realize you can kind of throw it up to and kind of rely on him to come down with it. So I'm really excited to see what his role is to start the year, how his role evolves, and kind of where he stands in the room. He's also changed his number. He was in the 80s in the fall. I think he was wearing 86, and now he's wearing 19. Again, aesthetically, it's a better number as well. So excited to see what we get out of Mosey this fall. Sticking in the receiver room, I think a wild card in the room to keep an eye on is Jeremiah Jones, who joined the program over the summer out of Murray, Kentucky. A guy Nebraska loved. Nebraska had to fight to keep in the class after a late push from Missouri. Florida State was in the mix. Louisville wanted to keep him in the state of Kentucky as well. So it was a battle to keep him in the class and keep him committed, but Nebraska got it done. He's a versatile athlete at 6'5" or 6'4", now 225 pounds. That out of high school could have been seen as a tight end or a receiver, a safety, a linebacker, could play all over the field. There's even some, kind of buzz at one point that, his best position long term could be edge. Nebraska's starting him off at the receiver position. And if you go back and look at his senior receiving tape, there's a reason for that. He was a dominant receiver as a senior, can kind of go up and get it. Has the speed to stretch defenses. Is just a big body that's tough for cornerbacks to kind of stick with. And it's a kind of a big body Nebraska doesn't really have. Quinn Clark's a big body, of course, at 6'5" plus, but Quinn doesn't have kind of the mass that Jeremiah Jones does. And honestly, like I think Jones is a little further along than Clark was when he joined the program out of high school. So I'm intrigued to see if how much Jones we see. Just talking to people behind the scenes, they're quite bullish on where Jones is when he enrolled at the program, where he sits within the program right now, and what his role could be this fall, even in a deep receiver room. I think there's a role for that big body pass catcher that maybe in a goal line situation or in the red zone, closer to the goal line if you need to throw it up. He's that type of receiver. So I'm excited to see what Nebraska does with him. And honestly, I think he's a big wild card in the sense that, man, like again, Nebraska's deep at receiver, but if Jones clicks and does start to kind of play like the dominant receiver he can be, he could be stealing snaps from an established receiver on the team. He could be stealing snaps from an Isaiah Hunter or it's a world where it's not a bad problem to have at all, but it's a world whereby October, November, Nebraska could be faced with this dilemma of who they trot out there with Dylan Raiola on any given offensive possession. So um, he's the wild card. He's a guy that the staff is really excited about, really excited to have in the room, and one they're really excited to kind of get their paws on and continue developing over these next few years. And so we'll see what kind of role he plays early in the year. But yeah, again, wouldn't be surprised if you see 80 out there a couple times this fall. Outside of that, I don't know how many other offensive players you see contributing for Nebraska this fall. You could see, offensive linemen. I think if there's a offensive lineman that contributes as a freshman, it's Houston Keanu Torres, maybe in a rotational type role on the interior of the line. He's a guy the staff is excited about long term. He's a little further ahead than the staff expected when he joined, and is a guy they see as maybe the center of the future moving forward after Justin Evans departs for the program. But again, just Nebraska's pretty deep along the interior. They feel pretty good about their depth at guard and center, and as good as Keanu Torres might be, this staff could just lean on some of the older guys, even in those kind of rotational roles up front. Defensively, again, I Nebraska's pretty deep in the secondary. I'm not expecting really any freshmen to contribute at secondary. I think you are going to see some newcomers contribute. Andrew Marshall for one, Justin Redd potentially, Jameer Khan potentially, but I don't think you're going to see any of the freshman DBs contribute. That's not to say the staff isn't excited or you shouldn't be excited about some of the young guys. I do think down the line, Bryson Weber's a corner they're excited about. Caden Vermas and Tanner Church are intriguing athletes at safety. Vermas in particular kind of has the combination of physicality and athleticism Nebraska wants at the rover position. He's a future rover candidate in my opinion, as he continues to develop and learn inside the program. Linebacker, Nebraska put together a really good linebacker class with a headline by Christian Jones. Dawson Merritt, of course, was a big win, flipping in from Alabama. Those two guys we could see in a rotational role in the linebacker room. Jones was healthy through the spring and did work in that inside linebacker rotation. Merritt missed the spring with an injury, but has the athleticism and has put on weight now, standing around 225 pounds to contribute in the linebacker room. Jones, I think, is a true inside linebacker, and I think Nebraska is going to use him there. Maybe get him some snaps at Jack potentially too off the edge because he does have some pass rush ability. Merritt, I'm intrigued to see what Nebraska does with him. He can play, he can stick at inside linebacker, but he is a really talented pass rusher. Does kind of have some natural bend and juice to him off the edge, and so he may not have the size necessarily right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if Nebraska tries and works him in at some point in that jack, even if it's just in practice in fall camp. Works him in at jack and potentially kind of utilizes him in areas where he can get after the quarterback a little bit. I think where you're going to see some freshmen contribute defensively is up front. And specifically, if looking for one guy, I think you should point to Malcolm Simpson, the four-star out of Hitchcock, Texas. Nebraska landed him over some national competition. USC was in that mix. A&M was in the mix. Houston wanted him. SMU wanted him. Had some, kind of some late interest from Texas and a few other national powers that circled back on him. Man, I love Malcolm Simpson coming out of high school. He's a guy I covered a few times. He started his career at Galveston Ball. I got to see him as a sophomore or a junior at Galveston Ball, and then he moved to Hitchcock as a senior. Has the multi-sport athletic background Nebraska loves. Plays basketball, competed in track as a senior as well, or in field events specifically as a senior. Really a talented basketball player, can dunk, um, can kind of stretch the floor as a 6'4" uh kind of a big body on the basketball court. And he's put on weight. He's put in the work in the weight room. I was pleasantly surprised in the roster update to see he's up to 285 pounds. He joined the program right around 265, 270, so that's a good amount of weight added. He's got the frame to carry that and maybe more. So with the added weight, with the kind of versatility he has, if you go look at his high school tape at Ball and Hitchcock. He has some snaps as a stand-up edge. He has some snaps kind of as a seven tech with his hand in the dirt, as a nine tech with his hand in the dirt. Can even slide inside at three tech and even played some nose tackle as a junior at Galveston Ball. At his size at 6'4", 260. And so he's really powerful, really athletic, can penetrate the backfield, can also set the edge. And if it all comes together for him, if he's locked into his development here in fall camp under Terry Braden, Nebraska kind of needs a little additional depth, some help along the defensive line. I would look for Simpson to get some snaps off the bench and potentially grow his role as the season progresses. He is an instant impact type player. I don't think he's a guy that will need a whole lot of time in the weight room or really anything else to contribute. And he's gotten obviously that added mass. So I think if you're looking at where specifically he'd fit in, I think defensive end in Nebraska's kind of three down front, kind of rotating in with the Keona Davis, maybe with the Williams and Renari. Uh, at defensive end, has the kind of size to kind of stick for a couple snaps if needed along the inside. If they ask him to rotate with Riley Van Poppel or Elijah Judy, I do kind of think he'll be able to hold his own even in the Big Ten, even against some of the big guards Nebraska would face in the Big Ten. So I think if you're looking for one defensive lineman, one freshman defensive lineman to contribute, my bet is on Malcolm Simpson. I think if he was healthy, if he didn't suffer that torn ACL, I think you would have seen Tyson Terry in that defensive tackle rotation as well. But unfortunately, suffered that torn ACL late in his senior year. Is probably going to miss this full 2025 season as he recovers. But Nebraska is excited about adding Terry to the room in spring and moving forward to that defensive tackle room. The other defensive lineman Nebraska added was Cade Petrak out of North Dakota. Really powerful defensive lineman, explosive defensive lineman, has a first step. Unlike any other I really saw in the 25 class, and that's just talking in Nebraska's class, really anywhere. I think it's a first step you can't teach. It's explosiveness off the line you can't teach. You got really powerful hands. And I think there's going to be a bit of a adjustment period because he's coming from North Dakota. Um, you know, Football in North Dakota is so much different than Big Ten football, and so it's going to take a second, I think, for him to get his body ready for the Big Ten, have the physicality and the speed needed for the Big Ten, but the natural explosiveness and that natural first step. He's a guy that, especially early in the year against the Akrons and the Houston Christians, I could see Nebraska kind of utilizing off the edge, maybe even as a stand-up jack, maybe at defensive end. And as he continues to add mass for him, I think he stands right around 265, 270 right now. I think the goal is to get him closer to 280, 290, like Malcolm Simpson down the line. He's a guy the staff should be excited about, rightfully excited about his future contributions. But I think this year, I think the more likely expectation is he redshirts as a freshman. Maybe he sees action in 3, 4 games, but likely redshirts as a freshman as he develops behind the scenes with Terry Braden and the defensive staff. Besides that, I don't know how many other freshmen you're going to see this year. Again, at quarterback, they are excited about TJ Lateef down the line, but the quarterback room is so deep and pretty set right now. I think Lateef's competing for QB3 this fall to be the third guy behind Dylan Raiola and Jalen Gramstead. But I don't expect a whole lot of Lateef this fall, barring something disastrous further up the depth chart. Running back, the move of Mosley, I think, limits how much we're going to see Jamarian Parker and Connor Booth, the two other freshmen running back Nebraska added. Parker, having added some weight now up to 200 pounds, could see him. He does have kind of that home run hitting speed that few other backs on the roster do right now. Has kind of the explosiveness that Nebraska wants, and could maybe carve out a niche role for himself, maybe as a third down type back, maybe the fourth back off the bench behind. Emmett Johnson, Quentin Ives, Isaiah Mosley, and Kenneth Williams. Like maybe the fourth or fifth back. Mekhi Nelson in that mix too. The Nebraska has some bodies in the running back room. They're just unproven. So, but they are excited about that room. They are excited to kind of flesh out that room and kind of spread the carries across multiple guys. Again, the expectation is that Emmett Johnson, the bell cow back, but with the depth they have in the room, though unproven, I don't think it's going to be Emmett toting the majority of carries every single game. I think they're going to save him. I think they're going to kind of utilize him in a way to keep him fresh and but just enough that he has, a pretty solid year of tape and really solid year of production. Again, up front, I think the other two offensive linemen Nebraska added are more developmental pieces. I wouldn't expect to see them for maybe a year or two, as they develop behind the scenes. Defensive in the secondary, like I mentioned, kind of expecting not a whole lot from the freshman secondary members, just because they're going to be developing behind the scenes, getting a lot of work in with Phil Snow, a lot of work in with Addison Williams and the staff behind the scenes. Fall camp starts today, so be sure to tune in for coverage over at InsideNebraska.com. We'll have press conference coverage later today and probably a rapid recap from what we saw at practice on Monday. So be sure to stay tuned for that. We appreciate you guys tuning in. That'll do it for us here with Recruiting Blitz. We'll be back with another episode next week.